nobody doing it better. Y'all some lightweights. Malik Wright, up all day and all night, pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles. Got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick that, relax, the team WSN.
Thank you guys for joining us for another episode of the Sit Down Morning Show with Malik Wright, presented by our company, The Right Way Sports Network. I'm your host, Malik Wright, joined by my co-host always, Daniel Alameda. This is also Fantasy Football Friday here at TWSN, so you know what that means. We'll be joined by TWSN analysts Michael O'Hara, Steve Bradshaw, helping you get set with your fantasy football lineups. As always, want to remind you guys, make sure you guys do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. Daniel, the Jets looked like the Jets that majority of us were hoping they'd look like today.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
The Jets stomped on the Patriots, and that's a whole nother discussion in itself. But I want to get your thoughts. I want to get your thoughts overall on the Jets. There was a weird interaction on the sideline. I'm not sure if you saw between Robert Saleh and Aaron Rodgers, and it brought up an interesting question for me, and it was, who's actually the leader of the Jets? Is it Aaron Rodgers or is it Robert Saleh? You know, for me, I'll just say it. I think it's Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
I think Aaron Rodgers is the leader through and through of the Jets, because I don't think a guy like Robert Saleh knows how to win. So I think sometimes he does get carried away. Remember, in large part, why this guy landed this job is due to his amazing energy on the sideline and his ability to get people excited. He was a fine defensive coordinator, maybe a little over-exaggerated in a lot of people's eyes. But all in all, it was the energy that he brought. And New York was vying for a coach that brought that to the table, right? That's why he's in the job that he is in. But make no mistake about it, in my opinion, Aaron Rodgers is the leader through and through of the Jets. He's a guy that has a Super Bowl. He's a guy that has MVPs. He's a guy that has been a perennial lifer, if you will, in the NFC Championship and playoff contention. So honestly, I feel like Robert Saleh is beating to the drum of an Aaron Rodgers. What say you, though?
Yeah, I think if we read the tea leaves, right, and the tea leaves, what they're saying is the past couple years without Aaron Rodgers, go look at last year when Aaron Rodgers was hurt, all the players were saying, let's wait till we have another quarterback. This offseason, everybody's saying, what's the biggest difference? Well, when you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, this is what happens. So if your entire season is built upon who is your quarterback and is built upon, all right, we're waiting for this dude to get back in the locker room, we're waiting for this dude to get back on the field, then he's your leader. And I look at Robert Saleh as a guy that the past couple seasons that he's scraped by respectfully. And that's the issue I have with the Jets. That's the issue I have with Robert Saleh is, how are you so reliant on your quarterback to be the guy that brings you to success? And that's what kind of has hindered them so far throughout the season, right? Even this week, they mollywopped on the Patriots. Malik, I don't think they look great. I think that they have two very good running backs. I think that they have a wide receiver in Garrett Wilson that's slowly coming to his own. And I think that they have a quarterback in Aaron Rodgers that's just making the right play. But if you were to say that this New York Jets team looks unstoppable, or this New York Jets team is, has an elite culture right now, or has a, superstar team written all over them, I don't think so. I think that they have a fine team written all over them. I think that they have, their offense is methodical. It is not a superstar-led offense. They're just methodical. And that's what, carries me to believe that this really is Aaron Rodgers, mainly running this ship. And it's Robert Saleh. Obviously, he's the head coach, but is he the guy that's, making all this tick? Is he the guy that's, turned the season around? Is he the one that, turned it from last season where it was a shit show to this season they look like a competent football team? I don't think so. This is the same offense I saw last year, respectfully. And the only major difference is They brought in a running back, Braylon Allen, that they can swap in and out, and they've got a 1-2 punch, and they've got Aaron Rodgers running the show. Because when I look at the team and I went back and rewatched last year's offense, see what's the difference, it really is just the quarterback. It's Aaron Rodgers making quicker decisions. It's Aaron Rodgers being much more accurate than last year's Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle and company. But when I look at this team, Malik, do I see a different culture? No. Do I see a team that can go beyond Aaron Rodgers if you were to retire this upcoming year? No. And that's what leads me to believe that Robert Saleh isn't necessarily the long-term head coach for the New York Jets. They're a fine team right now. They are slowly coming into their own, but I think a lot of that has to do with Aaron Rodgers running the helm on offense.
Well, you came out on today's show off the top rope. I wasn't going to go that far.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to see that we both probably see it very similarly when it comes to Robert Saleh, Aaron Rodgers, the whole fiasco. I just think Aaron Rodgers is the leader through and through, man.
Yeah.
And I think that, I think it's fair to say that if they don't produce the success that a lot of people are anticipating them to do this year, I think Robert Saleh could find himself on the outs. I really believe that. I think you have to learn how to win in order to, be a winner. And I think that, obviously him coming from the 49ers is a little bit different. It's different when you're the lead man. It's a little bit different when you're the guy everybody's expecting to lead the football team come hell or high water. It doesn't matter if Aaron Rodgers is in the lineup or not. This is a guy that Robert, he is learning on the job in a lot of ways as well. And maybe this is his first time having a quarterback who he really believes in, and he really has that faith can get the job done. But make no mistake about it, this is Aaron Rodgers' team through and through. That's just my thoughts. If you guys could do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content. Keeping with the headlines, there's a certain fighter that is in the headlines before we jump on over to our NFL discussion. Certain fighter that's in the headlines who just lost his bantamweight championship, who seems to be having a hard time coming to grips with the loss of his bantamweight championship. So with that being said, Mercer, I think we have a clip that we need to play.
Whooped. I'm going to ask the UFC if they will please post that fight on YouTube. I won the first, third, and fifth round. And I challenge all you fucking little dorks that think that I got my ass kicked to go and rewatch that fight, the commentary off, and tell me I did not win that fight. Oh, I'm fucking fired up right now. Oh, I'm the champ. I won. I'm the champ. Where's my belt? Get my belt out that suitcase. Get that belt out my suitcase. I'm the champ, baby. For real, though, all you fucking little dorks, go rewatch that fight. Go rewatch that fight. I'm the champ, baby. Rob's a bitch still. Fuck Merab. Let's go. Round one was clearly my round. Round three was a closer round. I still think it was my round. I do not know how to give it to Merab. You just look at the stat sheet. If he took me down a few times and literally did no damage. Tell me I'm wrong. Round 1, 3, and 5, I won that fight. Go watch that fight. Merab's fucking terrified of Umnar. Doesn't want to fight Umnar. I'm the champ. I would fight Umar next. I should fight Umar next for the belt. I'm the champ. I should defend my belt against Umar. God, it feels good to be the champ again. Went on a little emo phase there for a little bit. Dyed my hair black, straightened it. Got a couple more face tats, but we're back, baby!
So, this seems like a guy in Sean O'Malley who is in denial through and through. This is what we call crashing out. This is what crashing out looks like. Sean O'Malley is officially crashed out. He has got to a point where he has made it up in his mind to believe that, hey, you know what? I beat Merab Davashvili. Merab did nothing but run. Merab didn't answer the call when I asked him to stand with me. Merab only took me down a couple of times. He didn't hold me against the cage and punch me in my face a couple of times. He didn't ground and pound me. He didn't thwart my offense and turn me into, a shell of myself. He didn't freeze me, right? That's what this guy, is believing in his head. And you know what's crazy? I do agree with Sean, right? That the round 5 is a round that he won.
Yeah.
I do think that round 1 was a little bit more competitive than what people give thought. But the notion that, hey, you know what? I lost, right? I didn't lose is incorrect through and through. That's just my thoughts. Dan, what were your thoughts when you heard Sean saying that? Obviously, we interviewed Sean in the past. He's a very big personality guy. We got a chance to also catch up with him when we were at the Super Bowl Radio Row in Arizona. Very big personality guy. great dude, a good dude who we rooted for throughout his entire career. But I do feel like he's a little bit. I feel like he's going through the stages of grief after
Totally.
losing his belt. But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Totally. He is going through the stages of grief. And I think that's why it's entertaining as hell, to be honest. And I think this is a good thing for Sean, right? He kind of laid out his plan of what he thinks. And I've got only one, I've got two gripes, right? Number one, he took the loss very well in the first day after. Very well. They went on to the podcast and said, listen, and this was his own quotes. He said, I didn't feel like I got out techniqued, but he just out muscled me. He was stronger than me. And I feel like he controlled the positions in the fight. He said that. Tim Welch said that. And my biggest concerns and my biggest issue that I have with this is just hindsight, man. And you had multiple opportunities to go in and change it. And I would agree with them on the notion Merab didn't inflict crazy damage on him, but he controlled the fight. And that's where Sean O'Malley lost the fight. And I think that they do have to do some serious self-reflecting. And especially, I think head coach Tim Welch, and I'm sure he's going to. But my biggest concern is, he said on the show that he wasn't expecting Merab to shoot double legs. He wasn't expecting Merab to get that deep into his shots. And that's my concern is, man, like, what are we doing, right? How are we not expecting that? So Sean O'Malley, I think he is going through the stages of grief. You looked at the first immediate day, and then you looked at once he rewatched the fight, he goes on social media and says, I won, I'm the champ. And it's a funny video that we just showed right now. But he knows he lost in his heart, and I think he's trying to tell himself, hey, maybe I eked out a decision victor. Maybe I won one of the 3 rounds or 3 of the 5 rounds. But I truly believe in his heart, he knows, hey, I got controlled. And he's just trying to lay the groundwork for what his possible return would be. And I think he's on the same page that everybody else is, that we believe Umar Nurmagomedov is going to beat Merab. And I think Sean's trying to get ahead of the wave and say, hey, let me jump the line again. Let me not have to fight anybody else, and let me get a title shot. So, and I also don't like how Tim Welch, and once again, this is just my opinion, I don't like how they were using his injury as an excuse again. They said,
You
yes,
felt that they were using it as an excuse?
on one of Tim's shows, he said, listen, like, we weren't able to train our wrestling as much. We weren't able to do this. So once, and maybe it is true, right? Maybe he shouldn't have fought, so soon. But there were a couple times where Tim said, hey, like, we should have taken after the Cheeto fight, we should have taken a year off. And at this point, it's like, hey, listen, Sean O'Malley and you guys, they had everything that went right for them heading into this camp. And they said that. So I hope that Sean O'Malley comes back better. And I'm curious to see if he does get a title shot before his next fight, because that would be interesting.
Yeah, I didn't listen. I don't think they necessarily were trying to make an excuse, me personally, because
Okay.
I think that's been a reality that Sean has dealt with so many injuries, throughout his career. Even when we talked to him, he talked about the injuries that he faces, stuff like that. But here's one thing I'll say. I think that I think that when you're dealing with such a figure as a Sean O'Malley, there's a lot that comes with it. I see, 92 Slurps saying he's trolling. Dude, Malik, you're so wrong. Y'all be so dumb, and we appreciate the respectfulness you're showing too. But
I think he's serious.
Huh?
I think he's serious.
I think he's serious too.
Yeah.
Knowing Sean's personality, having talked to him and interviewed him, and even talking to him behind the cameras, I really believe he's a guy that he's delusional in a lot of ways, where he'll convince himself that, hey, I won the fight. If you also look at the Peter Yan thing, he did the same exact thing during that fight. He was at first like, he didn't feel great about it. Then he went back after a couple of days. I was like, we won. Go back and look. This has been Sean's MO throughout his career. Even when, they announce him as the loser, as a 1 loss on his record, he always throws up the O. And I think that's his way of keeping himself in the headspace that I'm still the GOAT.
Yep.
I'm still this. I'm still that, whatever the case may be. But I definitely, if I could offer up any advice, there's not a fighter who is as active as a Sean O'Malley or any fighter that is going into a fight fully healthy.
Yep.
There are so many nicks and injuries that come up through it, right? Whether it be toe injuries, coming in with torn hamstrings, we've seen fighters come in with and stuff like that. There's so much that goes into a fighter, preparing for a fight. I just think that it's one of those things where, Sean has to again tell himself that, hey, you know what, I'm still that guy, I'm still there, and you know what, it's served him so well to get to this point. It really has, and I kind of told you offline what I think. I don't know if he'll ever touch championship gold again, at least in the bantamweight division. I just think it's just too tough. It's too much amazing talent that is coming up. Um, but I do think that there is a world where he moves up to featherweight and maybe he gets a win or two up there and he could be fighting for the championship belt. Ilya Topuria came out and said that fight is no longer an option because, he doesn't feel as if, Sean would be deserving of it. Essentially, he believes that there will be other fighters who will deserve an opportunity to fight him and better fighters that'll come along. So it's one of those things where, we know him, we followed his career for the most part. I think it's just one of those things where he's gonna bounce back. Yes. It's just a manner in which he's gonna bounce back and how that's gonna look, right? If you guys could do us a huge favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content. We'll be discussing some NFL action. We'll also, as the show goes on, we'll be getting you all set up for our favorite bets for week 3 of the NFL, as well as helping you set your fantasy lineups with TWS analyst Steve Bradshaw and Mike O'Hara. So we appreciate y'all for tuning in and making us part of your morning. Let's move on over to the NFL, Daniel. Let's move on over to the NFL. Week 3 is here. And it's crazy to think because we were just clamoring, waiting for the league, the new league, this new year to start. And here we are. It's already week 3. So I want to talk about some of the matchups that you're paying attention to for week 3 of the NFL. Not from a betting perspective. I got to make sure I say that because that's where your mind usually goes.
Totally.
But what are some games that you're looking at, man?
One of the first games I'm looking at is the Packers versus Titans game. And this Titans team just intrigues me, right? We were discussing last night about rookie T'Vondre Sweat. This defense has the potential, in my opinion, to be one of the best in the league. I think they arguably, and I'm going to say, I think they have the second best defensive line in the NFL. You go look at their guys. You got Jeffrey Simmons on the inside. You got T'Vondre Sweat. You got a couple other guys that they just added. And I think that there's a real world where you look at what that Titans defense has done, and I think they're going to make serious noise. So this week for me, with the Titans versus the Packers, is going to be, can Will Levis get it back on track? Because I think, we've started to see the tea leaves of a Will Levis and, Brian Callahan not be on the same, necessary terms. But Will Levis, went back and rewatched him. He's a fun quarterback. He's exciting. And I think there is a real world where it really is 50-50. I could see a world where Brian Callahan brings competition this offseason for the quarterback position. But I can also see, a world where they roll with Will Levis and say, hey, we're going to, grow with your growing pains. We're going to grow with your flaws because your highs are extremely high. So that's the first game I'm really excited to see. I don't think Jordan Love's necessarily going to play. I know he was practicing, but that's the first team that I'm personally just really intrigued to see. Another one I'm intrigued to see. We discussed this on yesterday's show, but the Texans versus the Vikings game. And I think my biggest takeaway from this is going to be, let's see what Bobby Slowick's got on offense.
You love Bobby Slowick, man.
Well, hold on. I don't necessarily love it. I'm just curious because Joe Mixon wasn't practicing.
Mm-hmm.
Damian Pierce wasn't practicing. So you're going to be rolling with Cam Akers and Dare Ogunbowale as your running backs. Like,
sounds elite.
Nico Collins, I believe, was limited. He didn't practice for the first 2 days, and yesterday he was limited. Let's see what you can do, right? Let's see. This is what contenders are made of. Hey, you got to go into opposing territory against one of the top 5 defenses in the NFL. Let's see what you can cook up, because I think that this is a real world where, obviously, I'm not going to say that the Houston Texans are frauds, but this is a world where CJ Stroud, let's see if you're the real deal. Go into Minnesota and cook up that defense. So that's one where I think Bobby Slowick is on my, not necessarily hot seat, for getting out, but he's on the hot seat for, hey, go prove yourself this week, because this is a week where you don't got all the talent on your roster and you got to really go out there and prove it.
I don't feel that way,
really,
personally. We don't disagree. We haven't disagreed, at least since we launched it.
Really,
I believe it's CJ Stroud. I think it's on CJ Stroud, not Bobby Slowick this week, because you got to realize a lot of people took CJ Stroud's big broing Caleb Williams the wrong way. They took it the wrong way.
Yeah.
They felt as if CJ Stroud was putting himself on a pedestal over a Caleb Williams, even though CJ Stroud is going into year 2 of his career, right? So even though I didn't take it that way, there are a lot of people out there that felt that way. a lot of people based around the Chicago area felt that way, right?
Mhm.
So the magnifying glass is going to be on a CJ Stroud this week when he goes up against a terrific defense that Brian Flores has put out there. And if he shits the bed respectfully, man, what does that look like?
Mhm.
Right? What are people saying after that? And I think that's a real, I don't think it's a possible, I don't think it's a necessarily is going to happen, but I definitely think he's going to struggle a little bit in this game. Brian Flores has a way of making things look a little difficult for some quarterbacks, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the NFL is always full of storylines. And when you think about it, this is like what a better way to go off of, oh, he's big bro and he's putting himself up there as some of the upper echelon quarterbacks in the league already. And then next week you go against a defensive coordinator and Brian Flores who terrorizes opposing quarterbacks. So here's the one thing I'll say to that. I think whichever coordinator, either Bobby Slowick or Brian Flores, has the better game, I think they all automatically skyrocket themselves to a potential head coaching candidate.
Yes.
Being a potential head coaching candidate during this offseason cycle.
Mhm.
I believe that. I think this is going to be one of those marquee matchups where if Bobby Slowick and he's able goes out there and he's able to scheme without a Joe Mixon potentially or Damian Pierce potentially and beat a B-flow defense and make it look easy. Yeah, you could say what you want about, oh, it was the quarterback the whole 9 yards, but at the end of the day, some of these teams that are looking around for a potential new head coach are going to be like, Bobby Slowick is the answer that we're looking for as a potential head coach. And the same thing goes for B-Flow. You know, if B-Flow goes out there and slows down one of the hottest offenses in the NFL in the Houston Texans, people are going to be looking at him like, okay, maybe Miami was the issue. Maybe there was some other contributing factors that we didn't correctly analyze as to why he didn't have success. So yeah, this is a huge game for both coordinators. I've got my full attention on this game this week, Dan. Is there anything else you wanted to add about this game?
Yeah, I think it's something that, piqued my interest during the offseason, when we were looking at prospects, right? Draft prospects. And even during free agency, right? A lot of these teams will sign or even look at a player if a player had a huge game against them. And I think that's a common theme to where it's just bias in your head, right? If you get, dominated by opposing edge rush or a third string wide receiver goes off for 80 yards against you and he's in free agency, you're going to remember what he did. And I think the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there can be one specific matchup in a season that people will remember. And I think that this could be the matchup, right? We can be talking in the offseason and saying, hey, is Bobby Slowick or is Brian Flores the guy? You can go and pinpoint this specific game and say, hey, Bobby Slowick schemed up against Brian Flores and they went out and they beat the Minnesota Vikings by 20 plus. Or on the flip side, hey, Brian Flores without JJ McCarthy, without, a star group outside of Justin Jefferson, he went and out-schemed a team and they beat the Houston Texans and they dominated CJ Stroud and they made the offensive rookie of the year look like an absolute game manager who threw 2+ picks. So I'm excited for this matchup, and I know everybody else is going to be tuned in for it. Another one I want to talk about real quick is the Dolphins versus Seahawks. And I feel like not enough people are discussing the Miami Dolphins. And the reason why is there's the sentiment, and I'm guilty of it too, of saying, hey, Tua Tagovailoa is a game manager. He's not the reason why the Dolphins are having success. So if that's the case, and if they're trusting Skylar Thompson to come in, I want to see this offense run smoothly. I don't want to see it as good as Tua, but let's discuss how good this Miami Dolphins offense is. Let's discuss how good Mike McDaniel really is of scheming stuff up, because if he's so good, let's see you do it without Tua. And I think that this is going to be a very pivotal, stretch of games for the Miami Dolphins if Tua weren't able to come back. And obviously we hope for his health, but this is Mike McDaniel's spot to really prove himself. And I believe that this offense can run without Tua. So I'm just fascinated to see it because you got all the talent there. A-Chain's healthy, Tyreek's healthy, Jalen Waddle's healthy. Go out and put up a good performance against the Seahawks team, because this Seahawks team, even without Tua, I believe the Miami Dolphins are still 1-point underdogs. So they're still right in this game. Go out and show how this offense is still high caliber without Tua.
There's one game that I'm looking at, man. It's the Dallas Cowboys versus the Baltimore Ravens as well. Listen, you want to talk about big game? Listen, it's only week 3. But when we talk about a big game, man, I don't know if it gets any bigger than this. You got a Ravens team that's coming in 0-2, a lot of pressure on them to get it right. I would feel so much better about the Ravens' chances if they were playing in Baltimore, but they're playing in Dallas on the road in Jerry's World. Dallas is coming off of an embarrassing loss last week. Something's got to give. The levee has got to break for some team. And are the Ravens going to fall to 0-3? Yeah, are the Ravens going to fall? Like that's a real conversation we need to have. Are the Ravens going to fall to 0-3? Because I think there's a real possibility that happens. Listen, I think that Ravens defense is not good.
No.
I think that Ravens defense is not good. But you know what? I also warned about this earlier, before the season started. I said, I think the Ravens offense are going to struggle in the beginning of the season, but I think it'll look better. They'll start to round into form as season progresses. Yeah, I think that this is a spot in which the Cowboys might be the reason the Ravens fall to 0-3. And then what does that locker room, what does that roster look like if they lose that confidence, if they fall to 0-3, if they don't have, they haven't tasted victory.
Yep.
That's just what we just call it. They have not tasted victory. So we don't know if this thing might come apart a little bit. But it's going to be very difficult for them to build back up after. If you go 0-3 for any team, I don't care who you are, It's hard to build and keep fighting. 0-2 is drastically different from 0-3.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
I think shit hits the fan if they go 0-3. And this is where, to be honest, I'm not going to go out here and bullshit you guys. I have no read for this game. I don't. I went and I saw both teams have looked atrocious at times. The Cowboys looked atrocious in that first half against the Saints, and the Ravens looked atrocious in the second half against the Las Vegas Raiders. So my takeaway is, Malik, I do think if the Ravens go 0-3, I do think shit hits a fan. I do think there starts to be questions like we discussed on, I think, 2 days ago show, Lamar or John Harbaugh, right? Let's start to see. And I do think that people underestimated the loss of their defense coordinator, Mike McDonald. So I'm with you. I think that this is one of the matchups of the week because either way it goes, if the Cowboys lose, they're 1-2, you're falling behind the Eagles, you're falling behind the NFC. And is Dak worth the contract you paid? And then on the flip side, if the Ravens go 0-3, I do believe shit hits the fan because we discussed this on State of the Jungle, but there's only been, I believe, 6 teams to make the playoffs after starting 0-3 since 1980. So they go 0-3, it's very likely that they don't make the playoffs. So
I'm going to run through some of my picks this week before we jump over to our Bengals talk, and then we join our fantasy football guys. I think that the Browns-Giants game is going to be weirdly competitive more than people are giving credit, to the point where I feel it wouldn't shock me if the Giants had an upset, but I'm going with Cleveland to win this game, right? I think they'll just do enough to win this game. I think that the Saints-Eagles is such a good matchup. It's such a good matchup, man. I'm going with the Eagles to bounce back. I think the Eagles beat the Saints and kind of thwart all that hype that's a little bit. I think that Derek Carr is gonna struggle a little bit with that pressure of that Eagles defensive line. I like the Texans versus the Vikings. I do, but I think CJ Stroud is going to be uncomfortable throughout the game. I think it's going to be more of a defensive matchup. Buccaneers beat the Broncos, although I think Bo Nix might look a little better. In terms of Packers versus Titans, give me Packers. I don't like what's coming out of Tennessee, to be honest with you.
Really?
I don't. Okay. I don't like Callahan as a head coach so far. From again, maybe it's one of those things where he'll continue to grow as a head coach, but seems to lack a little bit of accountability and kind of like, no matter what, even if your quarterback is at fault, you always take the onus on yourself. I believe that. And I don't feel like he's necessarily done that. And I think that if he doesn't mind his P's and Q's, he could lose the locker room early. The way he treated Will Levis on the sideline, and also I think the way he treated Will Levis on the sideline, and then also the response even in the media left a lot to be desired, if you ask me. And Dottie, I hear you, but I think that this is the game where the Eagles get it corrected. I believe that. I think that they match up well against the Saints. In terms of the Bears versus Colts, this is a game right here, man, because it's weird. I could see. I told you. I think this is like my pick for the highest scoring game of the week. Bears versus Colts. Yeah. And if I'm going with that, give me the Bears to win. I think the Bears beat the Colts. Chargers beat the Steelers, although I think it's going to be a weird game.
Real quick, I think DeForest Buckner's out, I believe, for the Colts.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I think that's one of the best takes for this week, coming off of a Sunday Night Football loss. I'm with you. I think the Bears defense, that's another thing. The Bears defense have a very good defense. And I think if I'm gonna make prediction, I think we see 1 to 2 defensive touchdowns. I think we see a
Wow,
huge
that's
pick six. I mean, because I've seen Anthony Richardson, respectfully, I've seen him throw a ton of 50-50 balls. I've seen him throw a decent amount of mistakes, and this Bears defense is a ball hawking secondary.
Yeah.
So I think we see a pick six.
Yeah.
And Bears.
And in terms of the Dolphins Seahawks, I like the Seahawks in that matchup.
Yeah.
Panthers Raiders, I gotta fade the Raiders for as long. Whoa, Andy Dalton is starting now.
This is a fascinating one. I think
Andy Dalton is starting this week, man. Let's talk about that for a second. The Red Rifle, or as the NFL media call him, the Red Rocket. Although I don't think anybody ever called him that in Cincinnati. Yeah, I think this would be a letdown spot for the Raiders, right? After beating the Ravens. What do you think?
I don't know what to think. I think we see a lower scoring game. I think that this Raiders defense has a very talented defense. I do think that this Raiders offense looked a lot better than they should have looked at the end of last week's game. But I do think that we are going to see a jump from Andy Dalton after Bryce Young. And this isn't to say Bryce Young is not their future quarterback, or to say that he's not a potentially starting quarterback at some point, but I do think we see an immediate jump. It's almost like when a team loses their head coach, the next week you see it just some sort of unwritten rule where, hey, head coach is out the door, new head coach is in, and we're going to play a hell of a lot better. I think we could see something a lot different. He doesn't have terrible weapons. Deontay Johnson, I believe, is still healthy. Adam Thielen,
he's got the rookie tight end, Jadavion Sanders, right? Who hasn't done anything.
And he looked good in preseason.
Yeah.
So I think we do see an Andy Dalton very solid game.
That Raiders defensive line is really good, though.
Their D line is absurd. Yeah, it is.
But I'm going with the Panthers this game.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna go with the Panthers this game. I got a feeling, right? But if I was betting, I would probably take the Raiders, just because I think that's where the smart money is, especially with it being in the black hole. I just think it makes a lot of sense.
That sounds crazy.
Well, that's the
yeah, that sounds crazy. That's crazy.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
Come on.
No.
Then you got the 49ers taking on the Rams.
Ton of injuries in that game.
Yeah, it's a ton of injuries in that game.
Debo's out.
Yeah.
Kittle didn't practice. You look at the Rams, Kupp is out, Puka Nakua's out, O-line is hurt. 49ers, I believe, Charvarius Ward didn't practice. Ton of injuries in the game. Divisional matchup. Man, crazy.
Yeah. So I that game, man, give me the Niners. Lions versus Cardinals. I think the Cardinals fall back to reality. I think the Lions bounce back. I believe that. I'm going with the Cowboys. I'm going with the Falcons to upset the I'm going with the Falcons to upset the Chiefs. I believe that's gonna happen. Bro, this is gonna shock you.
Jaguars.
I think the Jaguars beat the Bills.
Yeah, I don't think that's really.
I think the Jaguars beat the Bills.
Yeah.
I think that everybody is low on the Jaguars right now, and I feel like this is a good bounce back spot for them. I think the Bills have shown a lot of good stuff, but I also feel like, I don't know. I feel like, obviously Tua went out with an injury and they were already controlling that game. I just feel like this is a classic letdown spot for the Bills.
Yeah.
I could see if I'm saying, hey, an area of focus for where I feel like the Jaguars could take advantage is really get Travis Etienne involved early and often. That would be my advice.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of this game. I think that we'll get to this in the betting segment. I think we see a lot of points in this game. I think it's almost like a classic game of, hey, whatever you did last week, everybody buys into the recency bias. And you go look at the Jaguars, they got mollywopped by the Browns. The Browns defense is a hell of a lot different than the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills defense has surprised, but they ain't the Browns defense. So I think we see a lot of points, and it's not like we haven't seen this before. 2 years ago, I believe the Jaguars easily, beat the Buffalo Bills in a game that shocked everybody. I think we see something similar here. Monday Night Football. I forgot there's 2 Monday Night Football games. So,
well, I think that this is the perfect spot, and that is crazy that they booked 2 Monday Night Football games. That's pretty insane. Washington Commanders traveling to Cincinnati, and this brings us to our next topic. Will the Bengals bounce back? We got to talk about that. Will the Bengals bounce back? Daniel, I think they will. I will say this. I think there will be early struggles early on with trying to contain Jaden Daniels. I could see them having success on the first drive, maybe the second drive. Not both, but just maybe the first or second drive. I could see the Jaden Daniels. I think that he'll rush it in for a touchdown. But I think that Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler are the keys to the game for the Commanders. I don't think that they can win the game for the Commanders, but if the Commanders are able to get up early on the Bengals, right, and play with a lead and, run that clock out, it could make life a little bit more tough for the Bengals. I still expect the Bengals to win this game, but I think Jaden Daniels comes out, looks good the first drive, kind of Luke gets an understanding of what he's trying to do, and then they start playing a little contain on him, and it makes life a little hell for him. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we do. I am concerned for the Bengals, and I'm not necessarily concerned about them losing this game. I think the Bengals will have this in hand. I think the Bengals look like an excellent team in week 2, but I am concerned of Jaden Daniels and Brian Robinson, and I think that this is the path they're going to go. They're going to say, hey, we're going to run the ball down the throats, right? We talked about Ramondre Stevenson, Isaiah Pacheco, and now Brian Robinson Jr., three.
To be fair, there's a certain style of back that the Bengals do really well against, typically defensively, and Brian Robinson fits that mold.
Really? You think so?
Yeah. He's the big, powerful style back that kind of is not like the most quick-footed right away, but he is the guy that kind of like he'll allow the Bengals defensive linemen to get in the backfield and make plays. Now, will they make the issue is going to be, are they going to be able to tackle?
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to tackle? If they're able to tackle, they'll be fine.
Yeah.
But I think that if they had like a smaller, quick twitch type back, maybe it would make me feel a little way. Ramondre Stevens is a guy that's a little bit different from Brian Robinson, even though you might look at them and say, okay, they're similar back. They're not. Yep. Ramondre Stevenson usually makes a decision and goes with it. Brian Robinson usually sometimes waits for that hole to open up, then he goes. Right. I got a chance to watch a lot of him, obviously being from Bama, Roll Tide. But I don't think that Brian Robinson is going to have necessarily the success that you're expecting. Now, I'll tell you what could happen if you get Austin Eckler involved in this game and you try to allow him to hurt the Bengals. Now, that's something I could buy into.
Yeah, completely.
But I don't think Brian Robinson himself is going to be the damage doer for the Bengals.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, especially, he won't be doing any damage if they're playing from down 2 scores. So I think the biggest issue, and even at some point, like Jaden Daniels, there's no doubt in my mind this dude rushed for 60+ yards. And I just think that it's too much of his play style. And you go look at this Commanders offense, they are very young in their transformation with Cliff Kingsbury as the offense coordinator. But his style is simple, man. And it's, hey, I'm going to go 1 read, 2 read, and I'm going to look down. I'm going to run the ball. And look at his, what he's done his past 2 games. Last game, he didn't rush as much, but all it takes is 1 to 2 big time plays. And the Bengals linebackers, I'm not too confident that they're going to, be able to, key in on Jaden Daniels rushing. I think that they need to make him pass the ball. And all in all, I think that the Bengals offense, we didn't really discuss this, but Joe Burrow, I think, has a field day. This Commander secondary is atrocious, and this is the game. It's lining up perfectly. T. Higgins might play, right? He was he practiced limited yesterday. You got Jamar Chase. You got the weapons to do it. So I think that we see this Bengals offense come out and dominate the Washington Commanders.
I'm glad that I finally heard you say it, because you kind of shocked me a little bit when you said, I'm nervous for the Bengals.
I'm nervous. I think from just straight up looking at their defense, I'm not nervous about this game. I think the Bengals come out.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think the Bengals come out and win this game, but I am nervous a little bit about this defense, and you have to set the tone early, because I do think that if the Commanders, it's similar to the Patriots. I think that this is a more dangerous offense than the Patriots. You go look at, hey, all it takes is 1 big time play from a Jaden Daniels, and that's really going to be, hey, just play basic coverage, honestly, on Jaden Daniels and make him throw the ball, make him stay in the pocket, and have a QB spy on him. And if you got a QB spy on him, that's the one thing the first 2 teams didn't do. If you QB spy Jaden Daniels, you should be fine.
Listen, I'll say this. Lou and the Bengals defense play with a quarterback by the name of Lamar Jackson in their division.
Yep.
If there was any defense that I expect to give Jaden Daniels issue, I expect it to be this Bengals defense. Respectfully, Jaden Daniels might look a lot different year 2, year 3 than what he's going to look year 1. But I think that there are some advantages of kind of getting a look at Jaden Daniels early on before you even have to play a Lamar Jackson-led Ravens team. I really believe that. You get to see how your defense is going to fare. But I also want to talk about Lawrence Guy, right? I'm not trying to say he's just some amazing, right? But Lawrence Guy was a good addition.
Oh, yeah.
Then you also look at what you can do, some of the interesting things you could do with a guy like Sam Hubbard, right? Throwing him inside. But Daniel, I don't know if you saw Bengals defensive tackle they drafted in the 2nd round, Chris Jenkins, returned to practice.
Wow.
Along with T. Higgins. So the Bengals are getting some reinforcements back. They're getting healthier. Will Chris Jenkins be active for this game? I'm not sure. Will he even play a big part in this game plan? I'm not sure. If he's active, I assume he's going to play because who the hell else are going to play, right? But if you ask me, man, I think that this Bengals defense finds a way to round into form. I expect this to be a good showing for them. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a good test for Jaden Daniels, good test for Lou's defense early on. I got the Bengals winning this game. I think the Bengals put up 30 points. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the Bengals put up, I think we said this on the show, like 30 plus points. I think Joe Burrow, 300 plus yards. And I just don't see, I see a world where the Commanders could start off hot, right? They get a nice first drive in. And I think that we'll discuss this on the props, but man, like I think there's a world entering the fourth quarter, Joe Burrow's not passing the ball. And I think that would be, from a betting perspective, that would suck. But I think there's a world where they're up by 2 to 3 scores. And hey, Zach Moss, Chase Brown, let's get a couple drives in.
You hope that's the case, right? Thank you guys for tuning in again for the Sit Down with Malik Wright morning show presented by the Right Way Sports Network. As we always say, this is the fun part of the show where we try to give you a little edge in your fantasy football leagues, right? We try to also make you some money when it comes to the betting perspective. So if you're a fan of money, if you're a fan of winning your fantasy football leagues, this is the time for you because this is Fantasy Football Fridays here on the Sit Down with Malik Wright morning show. Not just one, but we've got two. We've got Michael O'Hara. We got Steve Bradshaw. We got the rest of this segment, and they're going to help you guys set your fantasy lineups. Daniel, take it away.
All right, guys. So welcome into the show, and I'm excited for this week. I think that this is a huge and pivotal week for a lot of people's fantasy matchups. So let me just start this off by, going with each of you guys' first big-time matchup of the week and say, hey, what is a player that people are really low on that you feel like is going to have a massive week this week? And we'll start with Mike and then go to Steve.
Yeah, it's not one that I think people might be too low on after his last couple of weeks, but you got to get Rashid Shaheed into your lineup this week. This is a guy that I was touting throughout the offseason, and he has held up his end of the bargain pretty well. He's converted on a 59-yard touchdown and a 70-yard touchdown through 2 games this week. And I think that you can confidently start him as a wide receiver 3 moving forward for the rest of the season. I mean, he mixes in those intermediate targets and some manufactured touches, which gives him a pretty safe floor. And then obviously, he can get the deep ball to create a rather explosive week just out of nowhere. And I think he's got a really, really strong chance to do so this week. The Eagles secondary, the defense overall, allowing the most points to wide receivers this year in terms of fantasy points. And they've allowed the 5th most yards on deep targets this year. They've allowed 150 yards on targets, 20 plus yards down the field. They've got just a suspect secondary in general, and they run a lot of cover 3, which Rashid Shaheed has succeeded against. 2.43 yards per route run, which ranked 23rd among all wide receivers last year against cover 3. The Eagles run cover 3 at the 4th highest rate in the NFL this year. It's just a matchup that's setting up to be another shootout. Like I said, a pretty steady floor thanks to some of those intermediate targets and just he's getting carries out of the backfield. I mean, those kind of things are going to provide steady production. And I do like his chances to get past his secondary and connect for a deep shot, given how susceptible the Eagles secondary has been to the deep threat this year.
Completely. And first off, let me just say, I'm a terrible host. How are you guys doing? I didn't even ask how you guys doing. Steve, Mike, how are you guys doing?
I'm not doing too bad. I begrudgingly watched that Thursday night matchup last night. Enjoyed seeing Breece Hall play for about 3 quarters. I know he got some snaps there in the 4th, but he was fun to watch. Christian Gonzalez, the matchup between Christian Gonzalez and Garrett Wilson was fun to watch as well. Yeah. Other than that, Will Anderson, not Will Anderson. I'm blanking on his name right now. Teeing off on the Patriots.
Will McDonald.
Will McDonald teeing off on the Patriots tackles. It was a fun one for about a couple quarters, but you just had to enjoy the individual matchups as opposed to the game as a whole.
I'd be wrong, and I know this is Daniel's.
No, you're good.
I'm gonna give it back to him. But somebody made a funny ass comment in the comment section, and I got to get to it. It's great. We should probably name this a segment on the show. And they said it was our guy Gary Jellison, of course. He said the law firm O'Hara and Bradshaw.
The law.
I love that. That's great. That's great. The fantasy law firm. That's
Yeah.
still what we should call it from here
Yeah,
on out.
the fantasy
The
law
fantasy
firm.
law
I'll rock
firm
with it.
O'Hara and Bradshaw. No, continue, Dan. My bad.
No,
Sorry.
you're good. You're good. All right. So let's go to Steve here, man. Listen, I need some help with my fantasy team. So who's the guy that you've got this week penciled in as a must start no matter what?
Yeah, some guy that I'm absolutely starting is JSN after his dominant performance in week 1 or week 2 now, I believe. But he was a guy that I loved coming out of college. He was a guy that I loved coming into the year. And we were just waiting for him to overtake Tyler Lockett for what seems like forever now. He finally did it, had more routes, had more snaps than him by, I believe, like a few. And he dominated last week. He showed that elite production that he had at Ohio State. He was running all over the field. He was dominating, getting those PPR targets. And he's a guy that I'm not taking out of my lineup. He is definitely going to be a wide receiver, at least a flex option, but probably a wide receiver 2. I have him as a low-end wide receiver 2 this week. And regarding the matchup against the Dolphins, I think it's really good for him because you have DK Metcalf going to line up against Jalen Ramsey. And that's probably going to negate a lot of that fantasy production because Metcalf is going to do a great job stretching the field, but he's probably going to have a tougher time earning targets. That's going to open it up for JSN, though. That's exactly what he does. Has another receiver, open up the field for him. He works in the middle, gets those quick targets. And also, I was looking at PFF's cornerback wide receiver tool, and JSN has a good matchup for the week, 73.9 score, which is up there with some of the elite receivers. So I'm really loving JSN, and he's a guy that I think could rise even higher and should just dominate from here on out.
I agree.
I just want to say something about JSN there real quick. I wrote about him in my week 2 takeaways for on the website. And yeah, it was super encouraging. For the first time in his career, he led the team in both air yards and targets. And he was playing ahead of Tyler Lockett in 2 wide receiver sets. I mean, that's all that you could hope for if you were rooting for a JSN breakout. I mean, it's all there. And I agree. It's a strong matchup for him this week. And I think you can confidently start him in your flex.
And once again, if you guys have any questions, we got a couple. We're going to get to some of them in a little bit. Make sure you guys drop them down below. This is Fantasy Football Fridays here on the Sit Down Show. Let me ask you guys a guy or just a specific matchup that you guys are fading this week, right? Let's say a defense that you're saying, hey, maybe I'm looking at this wide receiver, this running back, or this quarterback, and I'm potentially sitting them. And we'll start with, we'll go to Steve, then Mike.
That's tough, but there's quite a few players that I'm just not bought into. One, I'll start with the hot waiver wire pickup, Carson Steele. And it's not even so much the Falcons defense. I think that they're solid. I just don't understand the logic of people wanting to start him. I think a lot of people feel like they have to put him as their RB2, get him in their flex because they spent, fab on him, spent their waiver priority. And it just doesn't make sense. Like, maybe I'm missing something, but what has the undrafted free agent that's slow, has never scored more than a fantasy point a game in his career, proven to anyone? I don't get it.
Steve off the top rope.
Yeah.
Honestly, Ryan, if anything, I'm going for a guy that catches passes. Still doesn't do that, which is already just disadvantage in PPR leagues or half PPR leagues even. So it just doesn't make sense to me. I think a lot of, people, his projection is outside the top 24 running backs. But I get a lot of sit-start questions of, should I start Carson Steele? And it's like, why? Like, no.
All right. Wow.
And he fumbled last week. Just want to put that out there.
No
Chiefs hate.
I don't get it, man.
So, yeah.
Let me ask him a separate question.
Yeah.
Steve, I know you are a residential TWS and Bears fan. I got to ask, do you see any breakout potential this week with this Bears offense and Caleb Williams going against the Indianapolis Colts without DeForest Buckner?
I think that it will be better, but I honestly also have a few guys that I'm worried about. Keenan Allen. I think people are starting him way too high. I'm worried about DeAndre Swift. I'm cautiously optimistic that Caleb is going to be better. I think he's going to have the best performance of the year. However, that doesn't really mean much. So I think it'll be a little bit better. I don't think it's going to be an absolute train wreck. Like you said, DeForest Buckner not being there makes it a whole lot easier, and it should help them out a ton, especially because that offensive line is atrocious. So I think that kind of plays into what they need help with. But I wouldn't be saying, oh, this is the game where Caleb Williams shows why he was the number 1 overall pick and throws for 300, 400 yards. No, I don't think we're there yet, but I think he's going to have that, okay, he's not going to become a bust. He's going to throw for 200-ish yards, and I think we're going to be like, it's fine. Just give him some more time.
He said it's fine. He had pain behind that voice. Mike, let's get to your guy, right? Or you can even give us a couple players that you're not a fan of this week that have a brutal matchup, or guys that you feel like the rest of the community are saying, hey, I have this guy way too high. So what would you say is the matchup sus player for you?
Yeah, one guy, it's not even really matchup based. It's just like the overall offensive environment. You can reasonably bench Kyren Williams this week if you have a deep running back room. It's brutal out there. I mean, we saw this offense in general not be able to sustain a drive against the Cardinals. He ended up with a shade under 12 fantasy points last week, did Williams, and that was just bolstered by a fall-in, punch-in touchdown in the late in the third quarter. It was completely ugly, and Williams hasn't been efficient at all this year. He's averaging under 3 yards per carry. This is a guy who he's not like an offensive difference maker. Like Breece Hall, he was able to overcome and the Jets offense last year to find success. Kyren Williams rides the wave of a really strong role in a really strong offense, and that's how he was able to be the RB2 in fantasy points per game last year. This offense is in complete shambles. You brought it up earlier on the show, Daniel. Puka Nacua out, Cooper Kupp out, offensive lineman injuries galore. And, I mean, if you can't sustain a drive against the Cardinals, I don't believe that they're going to be able to do it against the 49ers defense. He's going to be the primary guy. I mean, you look at how the Rams offense operated. I mean, it's just Kyren Williams falling down for 2 yards on first down a bunch of times, and he's going to get 3-4 targets in the game. But it's just, I don't think that this is the sort of environment that's conducive to supporting Kyren Williams. And I don't think he's of the talent level to overcome the poor offensive environment.
Completely. I think that's kind of the story of this Rams season so far is the injuries. And let me get to some of these questions, and then we'll discuss a little bit more about some of you guys' favorite week 3 starts and sits. Real quick, Griffin McQuaid said, just traded Olave and Zamir White for A.J. Brown. Is that a good trade? And who would you guys say won that trade? We'll start with Steve.
I'd say it is entirely dependent on your record at the moment, how many teams make the playoffs. That's actually funny because in my home league, Olave was traded, I think, straight up for A.J. Brown. So I like the A.J. Brown side. Zamir White is also trash. I don't think he really does.
Wow.
I'm being a little negative this morning.
No.
I'm sorry, but I don't think Zamir White's very good either. But A.J. Brown's the best player in the deal. I think he is fantastic. Olave is good, and I think he's a good buy low, but they're not on the same level, in my opinion, when both are fully healthy. And even if Olave is producing, as long as A.J. Brown is back within the next, 2 to 3 weeks, I think I'd rather have the Brown side because it offers you more late season upside, playoff upside. So if you're 1-1, 2-0, I like Brown. And if you have say you're in a 10-team league and 5 people make the playoffs, around like half make playoffs, I think that it's going to be a lot easier just to get in there. And then all that matters is once you're in there, then you need the firepower. I'd go Brown in that situation, but if you're 0-2, I can see the Olave side as well, getting you points.
And Mike, adding on to that real quick, we also have a question from our guy, Will Holland. He said, would you start Shaheed over Olave this week? So the trade and Shaheed or Olave?
The trade, I think it's a smash win for whoever's getting A.J. Brown. Zamir White's a total zero in my eyes. He is absolutely nothing. I'm on the same page as Steve there. And I think A.J. Brown, both are, in my eyes, still wide receiver ones. I've still got Olave in my top 12 for rest of season. But there's tiers within the wide receiver 1 status, and AJ Brown is a tier above of Chris Olave. I mean, back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons, and like Steve said, as long as he's back in the next week or two, it's seeming like he'll be back week 4 or 5. So I'm expecting AJ Brown to come back and just assume that alpha dog, just absolutely dominating secondary's role. So yeah, I think that's a smash win for the AJ Brown side. And then here it's easily Olave over Shaheed. Olave is like, speaking of alpha wide receivers, he may not relative to the rest of the NFL receivers be an alpha, but he is the alpha in this offense. He's dominating the target share. I mean, we saw last week he went out and was targeted on nearly 50% of his routes. Like, that's absolutely bonkers to be drawing targets at that rate. And he's not, it's not like it's just a bunch of like dink and dunk
Mike,
stuff.
say that word again. Say that word again. It was absolutely what?
Bonkers.
That's great.
It is like getting targeted on half of your routes. Like, no one's doing. I mean, like, obviously it's a 1-game sample and it happens here and there, but it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, he's an enormous buy low. That's another one that I wrote up about in my week 2 takeaways. Like, please buy low. I talked about how poor this secondary is. I'm jamming every single Saints wide receiver I can into my lineup this week, and I'm very happy if I have Chris Olave on my team with this matchup against the Philadelphia secondary.
I have one question for you guys before we let you guys head out of here. The Chiefs have sucked against tight ends this year. Is this a spot where if you have Kyle Pitts on your fantasy football team where you could potentially get a big game out of him? I'm looking at it, and his props, right? Betting is our next segment. His props are kind of low, right? You know, he hasn't necessarily unlocked his full potential in this Falcons offense, but offensive coordinator for the Falcons, Zach Robinson's got to get it going for him at some point or another. And we've seen Isaiah Likely, we've seen Mike Gesicki, have big games against the Chiefs. Is this a spot where you guys feel like Kyle Pitts could break out as well?
Steve, you want to take that first?
Yeah, I like Pitts, and I think that definitely this is a great spot for him to have production. He's been solid the first few weeks, which, I mean, Drake London hasn't been that amazing either. So yeah. Kirk Cousins finally looked like he unlocked something on that last drive of last week. So I could definitely see Pitts in a favorable matchup. I think he could have a big game here. I would definitely look to start him, or, if you're expecting a breakout in those lines, I think I like it this week.
Yeah, I feel like when you look at 38.5 as his receiving yards and only, 3.5 receptions as his baseline, they're going to try to take a guy like Drake London out of the game, especially with Trent McDuffie. Mm-hmm. I feel like Kyle Pitts is the obvious answer. It can also be a big game from a receiving standpoint from a guy like Bijan Robinson. To be honest with you guys, and I know this isn't necessarily our betting segment, I really don't love the lines in this Chiefs-Falcons game. They seem very, very high, which tells me that Vegas is expecting this to be a huge offensive game. I'm talking about Rashee Rice's receptions is at like 6.5. I think Bijan Robinson's receptions at like 4.5 or 5.5. Yeah. It's like they're really expecting offensive explosion in this game, and it's like obviously it's only one rock, a lot of mouths to feed. But I don't know if we get I don't know if we get that game that we're expecting, especially because Travis Kelce looks washed too. So that's a whole nother story in itself. But Mike, what are your thoughts on the Kyle Pitts?
Yeah, so we're at the spot at the tight end position where, especially with injuries to guys like David Njoku, Ferguson's questionable, Evan Ingram's not going to play. We're at the spot where if Kyle Pitts is on your team, you basically just have to start him. It's not really a question. I can't imagine like you shouldn't really be in a spot where you have a second tight end where you're questioning whether or not you should start him over Kyle Pitts. But the concerning part to me is just Kyle Pitts' involvement in this offense. I mean, Ray McLeod and Darnell Mooney are both getting targeted as the first read at a higher rate than Kyle Pitts.
Yeah.
And so like how this offense is schemed up in terms of getting Kyle Pitts involved, he's hardly ever the first read. It's just not pretty. He's not really getting targeted at a really high rate. He's at like a 10% target share so far this season. It's all a mess. He's like, I mean, I don't think that Kyle Pitts is the number 4 receiving option in this offense, but so far this season, he's the number 4 receiving option behind Robinson, Drake London, Ray McLeod, and Darnell Mooney. It's just been an absolute nightmare. I do think this is a smash spot for Pitts. Like you said, the Chiefs have been getting diced up by tight ends, by heavily putting their resources towards Trent McDuffie and using safety help to lock down the number one wide receiver. We've seen it from Likely. We've seen it from Gesicki in 2 weeks. So if this is not the spot where Pitts has a big day, it is time to hit the full-blown panic button. But like I said, I mean, it's like, it doesn't really matter whether I think Kyle Pitts is going to have a good day or not, because if Kyle Pitts is on your team, like, I would be hard pressed to see a team that you aren't forced to start Kyle Pitts, and you just kind of got to roll with the punches, at least for the time being.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, guys, I appreciate y'all so much for joining us on the Sit Down with Malik Wright morning show. We'll obviously be back next week talking fantasy. I didn't ask you guys, how are you guys doing in your fantasy football leagues? Mike, you're kind of quiet over there.
For me, it's a mixed bag. I'm holding down the fort in the TWSN league. I lost a league by 0.7. I lost a matchup by 0.7 points on that Jalen Hurts garbage time interception in like a 180 to 180 matchup. So it's a mixed bag. Got some team. I mean, I'm in a good number of leagues, so I mean, you can kind of expect it's going to be kind of all over the place. I've got a couple teams 2-0, some 1-1s mixed in there, and then some 0-2s. But I think it's on the up and up.
You slid that in there a little quick.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm not going to hide it, but the guys that I was highly targeting in my drafts, I mean, they're all looking good. I mean, I've got my fair share of Rashee Rice, Malik Neighbors, a lot of these, Nico Collins, a lot of these guys that are doing really well. So I can't complain. The prospects are looking bright.
And Steve, how about you?
You know, overall, it's going really good. I have my best ball drafts. I drafted about 50% J.K. Dobbins. Called me stupid for that. Well, look where we are now. So that's doing great. A lot of my leagues are doing good, except my home league. Every year, my players get injured. It's just a dumb league because my friends all look at like my rankings and they know what I'm doing. They take my players. And we also play in a league that veto trade. We allow vetoing trades, which is the dumbest thing ever. So if I get a really good trade, like they'll veto that as well. And after my first round pick, Puka Nacua got injured. Guess Deebo Samuel got injured again. So I'm 0-2 in that league, and it's really upsetting me. But outside of that, it's going very good this year. I think my takes and sleepers were pretty good this year compared to, almost any other year. So I can't be too mad, but had to complain about that.
Well, I'm wishing you both success this week in your respective fantasy football leagues. Any league that, if you happen to be in a league with Daniel Alameda, just know I'm rooting for you. I'm not rooting for Daniel. So I definitely don't want to hear him talk about that. So appreciate you guys. Listen, hope you guys have an awesome weekend of college football, NFL action. And again, we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Appreciate
you guys.
See you.
Catch you.
That was Michael Hara, Steve Bradshaw, TWSN football analyst, guys. We really appreciate the work that they do. But now it's time for the fun part of the show where we try to make you guys some money. And I think that we've done a good job of that the last few weeks. Obviously, there's no UFC action taking place this week. But guess what? I still like it. I still like it. I still like the NFL slate. I even like the college football slate to a degree. If you want all of our picks, you have to subscribe to the TWSN Patreon. The link is on the right side of me. All you have to do is scan that QR code. But listen here. I guess I'll start this thing off. I've got a bunch of props that I like. I'm going to give a couple. And here's the one that I like. A lot of people are low on Tyreek Hill and the Miami Dolphins this week, obviously with Tua being out of the lineup.
Oh, no.
What?
No, I've got one. I'm curious.
But I think Tyreek Hill has a good game.
Okay.
The last time Skylar Thompson started for the Miami Dolphins was in a playoff game. And you know who his most targeted receiver was?
Probably that boy.
Tyreek Hill. You know who had 7 receptions in that game? Tyreek Hill. You know who had 69 yards receiving in that game? Tyreek Hill. You want to know whose receiving prop is at 65.5 this week?
Low.
Tyreek Hill. You want to know whose reception prop is at 5.5 this week? Tyreek Hill. If you get what I'm putting down, I think Tyreek Hill is going to have a good day. I'm not saying the Dolphins are going to win, but guess what? Something about these backup quarterbacks, when you get a chance to throw to not the third string or the second string guys, you typically like to give them a heavy dosage. You want to be on the good side of that number one wide receiver. I think Skylar Thompson and Tyreek Hill will connect on a deep bomb in this game. I think they will connect multiple times in this game. Right, wrong, or indifferent, I feel like he is going to be the guy Tyreek Hill looks to. Even if Skylar Thompson was to get benched at some point, Tyler Huntley, guy they just brought in. I expect these guys to go to Tyreek Hill because it's what everybody in the league knows what type of talent Hill is, right? So I expect that guy to have a good day. Danny, what are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I like that. And I think we're on the same wavelength. It's kind of funny. We both looked at Skylar Thompson, what his tendencies are. First off, his yardage going from 99.5 with Tua to 65.5 with Skylar Thompson. That's a 30-yard difference. Skylar Thompson is not 30 yards worse than Tua and this offense. I'm with you. I think 65.5 is a beautiful line to take. I've got one I love for that game, Malik, and it's Devon A-Chain. I am in love with his receiving yards. This is my favorite play of the week. This is hands down, and this is, once again, you guys can get this, our full analysis on the Patreon. Go subscribe if you guys want to. But Malik, his line's at 25. The dude's had 7 targets and 7 receptions in both games so far this season. He had 70 receiving yards last game. They're using him out wide. And when you go look at what happened as soon as Tua went down, Devon A-Chain was targeted on 3 of Skylar Thompson's 8 completions, and he caught all 3 of those balls. Caught all 3 for, I believe it was for 35 yards and just 2.5 drives. So Devon A-Chain over receiving yards. This is a matchup where, and this is where you guys have to find nuggets in biggest discrepancies. And a lot of that is there a new quarterback? Is there an injury? And that's what we're going to do. We're going to take advantage of this Tua injury, and we're going to use it to our advantage because the books they don't really know what they're doing when it comes to Skylar Thompson. He only has 2 starts in the regular season. I love Tyreek Hill, and I love Devon A-Chain over receiving yards.
Man, since we're cooking, it's been a while since you and me had this back and forth. We've been cooking. Let's cook even more.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back to my old friend, and Marissa, I need you to clip this. I need you to clip it. I need you to clip it good when I say this. Listen up here. In the words of the lady who did, I made greens, beans, potatoes. Look here. I got some plays for you that I think you're gonna like. Mike Gesicki. The books seem to think that Mike Gesicki's game last week was a flash in the pan. The books seem to think that he won't repeat it. So much so that they disrespected him with the Lions this week, Daniel. They made Mike Gesicki, who's coming off of a 6-reception game for 90 some odd yards or close to 90 yards, right? What was it?
It was, I'll check, but
it was like 90 yards, whatever the case may be. They set his prop at 2.5 catches and 27.5 receiving yards against the Commanders.
Yeah.
Does anybody else see the issue with that?
Yep.
Listen, I understand that T. Higgins is pending his return.
Yeah, 91 yards and 7 receptions. 91 and off of 7 catches.
He had 91 yards, 7 receptions, and Vegas says, yeah, that was a fluke. Show us you could do it again. And what they did is they took Mike Gesicki's line, put him at 2.5 receptions, and his yardage at 27.5. If I were you, I'd run. I'd literally run to my sports book and I see if I can, number one, take that. But I'd also go to his alternate props and raise it up a little bit. Mike Gesicki is emerging in this Bengals offense. I think this will probably be like one of the last few weeks you can really get him at this line. Yep. I'm absolutely baffled. It wouldn't shock me if game time rolled around and guess what? The lines went up. So take it while you can. Take it Friday while you're listening to the Sit Down Morning Show with Malik Wright during the Right Bet segment. Mike Gesicki over 2.5 receptions. Mike Gesicki over 27.5 receiving yards are props that I'm absolutely hammering. If you can't see the emotion with me, I'm trying to tell y'all. I told you what Mike Gesicki was going to be in this Bengals offense before. I told you the game he was going to have against the Chiefs. And guess what? He's going to have a game against the Commanders. That guy is emerging. He's the best tight end Cincinnati's had since Tyler Eifert.
Yeah. I'm with you. And I went back and once again, 90 receiving yards off of 7 catches last week. That's not a fluke.
And he had 2 drops. And he had 2 drops. So what does that tell you? That's a guy that's emerging in this offense.
And he is being targeted on the second most routes out of any player in the NFL. So basically what that means is when he's running a route, he is the second most targeted player in the NFL. And that shows you 2 things. That shows you the Bengals haven't played him a ton. And that shows him when he's running a route, Joe Burrow is targeting him. So I'm with you. I'm a huge fan of that.
You want to hear something else as well?
Come here.
So right now, it's funny. Mel Kiper might hate this part. So Mel Kiper says he believes that too high safety should be banned in the NFL because it's making it's making things not fun. Hear me out on this. I'm about to cook. Listen. For guys like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, where these defenses are going to try to play top-down coverage and take away the bomb, this is the offense in which Mike Gesicki feasts. And this is why I was so excited about this signing in Cincinnati. He's going to be Joe Burrow's go-to outlet, the guy that Joe Burrow relies upon over and over again. I said to y'all last week, it wouldn't shock me if he led the Bengals in receiving. Guess what? He did. Guess what? I know T. Higgins is returning. I know Jamar Chase is returning. I know that the Commanders have a terrible defensive back room, and I expect Jamar Chase to eat. I expect T. Higgins to eat. But you know who else I expect to eat? Mike Gesicki. I think Mike Gesicki is emerging in this Bengals offense, and guess what? I can't stress this enough. If you have the chance, you take that. You take it through and through and through. I love Kyle Pitts against the Chiefs as well. We talked about it with our fantasy guys, Michael Hare and Steve Bradshaw. Kyle Pitts has a good game against the Chiefs. His line is sitting at 3.5 receptions. I think he has about 5, and Kyle Pitts' receiving yards are sitting at 38.5. Listen, Isaiah Likely, go watch the tape. Look what Isaiah Likely did to them. Kyle Pitts is much better than Isaiah Likely. He just needs the targets. He just needs the opportunities. And guess what? If Zach Robinson is the offensive coordinator that we keep lauding him to be, and we believe that he's very analytical, he had to look at the last 2 weeks with the Chiefs going up against tight ends and saying, you know what? We're going to exploit that matchup. We're going to make Nick Bolton cover. We're going to put stress on that Kansas City Chiefs defensive back room, and we're going to go to our guy, Kyle Pitts, over and over and over again. They could take Drake London out the game. We're fine with that, but stop Kyle Pitts. So again, you're looking at some props. I feel like tight end galore this week for me. Mike Gesicki, Kyle Pitts, Tyreek Hill, stuff I love.
I am a huge fan of it, Malik, and I'll just run through a couple quick ones right now. Geno Smith, 230 passing yards is a lock for me this week. He had 320 last week against the Patriots. Go look at who he's facing. He's facing the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins defense has not been very, very good. So I'm a huge fan of Geno Smith this week. I also like 2 players to throw an interception. We discussed this earlier in the show, and I'm going to parlay these 2. Give me Anthony Richardson to throw a pick against the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears defense has been absurd. They are a ball hawking secondary. Jalen Johnson. They've got a very underrated defensive line as well. And another player is Jalen Hurts to throw an interception. Go look at his past 5 games. He has 7 interceptions in his past 5 games. He has 1 interception in every single game this year so far. And I'm parlaying those 2 guys to throw a pick. And if I were to have one more play, I think, and this for Monday Night Football, I'm going to parlay your Mike Gesicki play and give me Jane Daniels over rushing yards, 45.5. Go look at what Lamar's done against the Bengals, and he has a very solid floor of not rushing under 55 yards, and he hovers around that 55 yards. And I think the Bengals are going to make life a living hell for Jane Daniels. And once again, I think we're going to see late in the 3rd quarter, in the 4th quarter, I don't see a world where the Commanders pull the plug on Jane Daniels, but I see a world where, hey, you're down 2 scores, you're down 3 scores, and he gets a couple scrambles for 15-plus yards. Who really cares at that point, right? The Bengals defense aren't going to let up a ton. They're not going to let up a deep shot, Terry McLaurin. So give me Jane Daniels over 45 rushing yards. I think he could go out and have 80-plus. So
I'll match you with one last play.
Yeah, let me hear.
Sticking with Monday night.
Okay.
Not Bengals, but sticking with tight ends. Bills, Dalton Kincaid, 3.5 receptions. 3.5 receptions. If I'm not mistaken, when I was looking at it, it might even be plus money.
Yeah.
It might even be plus money. It is, isn't it? I think that's a prop that I absolutely like. It's a prop that I think is going to hit. Listen, I think that Dalton Kincaid is going to be a guy that Josh Allen continues to go to over and over again and tries to look for to open up some stuff, because I definitely think that these receivers are still rounding into form a little bit.
Yes.
You know, I'm just double checking to make sure that is plus money. No, it's not plus money.
It's
It's
not?
minus 138.
Okay.
It's minus 138. I thought it was plus money. I was very tempted to also look at Brian Thomas Jr.
Mhm.
But I want to wait a little bit. I just want to wait to see another week under his belt to see what his usage is like in this offense. But again, Dalton Kincaid is a prop that I'm looking at. If you can't tell, I love some of the tight ends this week. I love some of the matchups this week. I feel very, very good about it. But listen, that's all the time that we got here today for the Sit Down with Malik Wright morning show presented by the Right Way Sports Network. I want to thank you guys for spending your mornings with us and making us a part of your daily routine. We'll be back Monday live at 10 a.m. And as always, I'll be live after the Bengals game, discussing it through, talking it through the good, the bad, the ugly, the whole 9 yards. We appreciate you guys. We really, really do. Remember, there's only one way you should be waking up, talking sports, having the discussion, and that is the right way. Enjoy week 3 of the NFL, everybody.